Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Engage podcast. This is a platform of how we can better ourselves because I believe, and this is because I've had that journey. If we better ourselves, we better our families, we better all the people around us, and ultimately, we better our community. Um, I tried a few of these recordings before, so this is absolutely not the first. And this recording may not see the light of day, but if it does, that means I wasn't looking for perfection. I just launched. And so this is really an exercise for me to get better at not necessarily launching when everything is perfect, but to launch and fix, as they would say in when I was in the military, fix the load on the road. I had something that happened to me the other day. I had a friend call me, and I'd gotten to know her for a few years, and she called me because uh, they had repossessed one of her possessions because she couldn't pay. And I thought for a moment, and I've over the years I heard that she was going through hardships, and me trying to be encouraging to her wherever we will touch base. She's one of those people who have a big heart, and sometimes having a big heart doesn't do anything for you financially. You can help friends, neighbors, especially where you're not when you're not working. I remember when I was unemployed, um, I went to the things that were easy, and I was playing for this church, and because that came easy, and there was always something to do there, I neglected like my job search, for example. And finally, this is so amazing, or I would say ironic, that I have been in workforce and career development for many years. But when it came to using all that I had in the way of experience for myself, I struggled. And some of you may be like that. And I think that's where she is. So she lost her her situation, and she had called me, and we were not talking about the fact that she lost her possession. It was just along in the conversation. And one of the things I realized is that I knew where she was. I never lost possessions in that way, but we had a conversation about how much she was in the rears and behind. It wasn't a lot of money. And I just said, man, listen, you could have called me. I'd have, did whatever I could to help. But then I said, man, some people just don't have relationships where they have friends that have a little extra where they can share. And that kind of reminded me of my childhood. One of the things that really motivated me to be different and to get out of the hood was seeing people struggle, especially my mom, having raised five kids. The other day I was looking at my birth certificate, and I thought she had me at 19, but she was 18 years old when she had me. Her birthday was going to be the next month. And we grew up struggling. And I remember going to work. And one day, I was working at this restaurant. And one day I came home, even though I saw my mom go to work every day. I was in her bedroom, and I looked at her they call those things? Check step. And I had made more money at least for that week. So I grew up watching my mom struggle, couldn't get ahead, raising 5 kids, but she kept us and she raised us properly. She wasn't perfect. She wasn't perfect at all. But she didn't have a network that she could call on when we got in trouble. We subsisted on government assistance, Section 8 and all that. And when I grew up, I didn't want to do that. I wasn't even thinking about family. I was just thinking about, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be in a situation where I can't pay my bills. I don't want to be in a situation where I have to rely on someone. I don't want to be in a situation where if someone called me to come pick them up, for example, I don't have any gas money. Or I didn't manage myself and my resources appropriately. And so often being in the low economic situations like communities, or we would call them ghettos, you don't have a lot of resources other than the people who are around you, and in a lot of ways they're lacking as well. And so I wanted to get out of that. But when I was having this conversation, I'd hearken back to my childhood. And I then looked around the people that I know, and I don't have people around me like that. And sadly, I've been disconnected from that for many years since I left home. And so the other day, or yesterday, I took my last class for my master's degree. My mother only had a 6th grade education. And I kind of looked on and said, my kids graduated from college. But that is a huge feat. That's a huge milestone. And I didn't think about that until I was reflecting on the conversation that I had with a friend who, even though we don't talk about her situation, but then that brought it back to my beginnings and how I need to do what I can to uplift people and encourage them and to let them know that this is not good, not necessarily just for you, but for your kids. For your kids. I was having a conversation with my son, both of them, and I said, do you ever remember a day when there was no food in the refrigerator, or the lights got cut off, or the water was cut off, or the phone was cut off? They have no clue. And my son, who was going to college, we were trying to figure out where he was going to school, and we were probably not going to send him where he is now. And he sent me a text message, and he said, Dad, and it wasn't a money thing. It wasn't a money thing, but it was going to be a good amount of change to send him. And he said, Dad, I don't have to go here. I don't have to go, he said. And if I don't go, I just want to let you know that I appreciate you. I don't know where you came from as far as how you were raised and how you lack so much, but you've given so much to us. And it's moments like that that make me sit and think and say, wow, if I didn't do it for myself, I gave my kids a good start. And that's what this is about. Some of us are dealing with traumas. Some of us are dealing with anxieties. Some of us are dealing with the fact or the feeling that we're not adequate because our life has been defined by the people who were around us who were not in the best mental, emotional states to be able to properly nurture us and hold us accountable so that we could be in a position to make good choices, because everybody around us in our neighborhoods did not have good examples. I thank God I had two teachers, Charmian Pope being one, um, Dunbar fifth and sixth grade school at that time in Fort Worth, Texas. The lady gave of her life to help hundreds of kids. And if they didn't remember any teacher, they always remembered her. And there's nothing I can do to thank her. There's nothing I can do to thank my mama or my big mama. My mom, during the crack epidemic, could have been one of those ladies that I saw who months earlier were walking around the neighborhood. And when that thing hit, within weeks, they looked like zombies. It was atrocious. And I grew up in that. But my mom had the wits to not succumb to that. And she did it by herself. And so I'm a blessed man today. I went to the military, the military, went to school while I was in the military, graduated, got out of the military, decided I wasn't going back home, and I stayed out here. I struggled even in the shelter for a little bit until I didn't want to go home. I wanted to do it on my own because I knew, not that I had bad people at home, I knew that wasn't going to get me to where I needed to be, because sometimes home is like a place where you're coddled. Your grandmother, your aunts, your big mama, there's no men around to kind of, hey boy, get up, go do this, go do that. So you're coddled and you become spoiled. But a young man, especially young boys, part of it, they need to struggle. I mean, so many single parents whose sons are not doing anything. They're sitting on couches, playing video games. Mom go to work all day. They were overly nourished and coddled. And the instinct to hunt, the instinct, especially for a man, to hunt and to gather and to provide, that has been cut out of him, to where as though he doesn't have all of the faculties to go and do it and go and be ambitious and go take the world by storm. That's why this podcast is important. This platform is important, because I'm going to deal with us, you. We're struggling. We've struggled. We've had traumas. But the world don't care about your trauma. They don't care about the fact that your mother struggled. They don't care about the fact that you got pregnant at a young age, or that you had a kid as a man at a young age and you had struggle. They don't care about that. They don't care about your mental health. They do care about how you show up. And this is what this is all about. How do you show up? I was listening to a conversation today, and some of the people that prepare job seekers to go to work. And one of the things they were saying is, a lot of times the people at these hiring events are just HR. So should they really dress up? I'm like, why are we even having this conversation? Why are we even having this conversation? You have to always show up, and show up well dressed with your best A game, especially when you have a need and you want someone in the world, just one person, to be able to solve it. Whether it be you get a loan, whether it be you get a job, whether you be you get a promotion or whatever. I'm gonna share this with you. When I started working, excuse me, give me a second because I took in some ice. Okay. I wear a suit every day. I knew what it was like to grow up in a neighborhood where I didn't have any good examples. And so I wear a suit for young boys. That if I see a young boy walking around in the mall when I'm taking a break, or I happen to see somebody come into my office who is probably there to get some assistance, and sometimes I meet their kids just passing through and going to my office. I walk up to those kids or introduce myself to them, or how you doing, and then I see their kid and I extend my hand to them. Why do I do that? Because they probably never saw a man in a suit. A, a black man in a suit. Probably never saw that. But that may be the catalyst of memory that say, I remember this man in a suit. I remember how kind he was. That's who I want to be. I didn't have that. And sometimes it just take that one experience to do that. I started working, and I would always wear a suit, and I wasn't trying to be an example. But I went to review resumes with one of my colleagues, and we went down to the HR department and we were looking at resumes and reviewing candidates for an upcoming interview session. And he came in with a suit on one day, and I said, "Oh man, you have a suit. You look nice, Mike." And he said, "Oh, I wore a suit because I know you have one on." I was like, man, when I got promoted at my job, my boss came to see me, and I'd heard over the phone that I got the job, and he, working in another office, came to see me, and he said, he had a suit on. He said, my director at the time said, "Where you going? You looking nice, you got on a suit." He said, "Yeah, I got a suit on because I know Kevin's going to have one on." You have to be an example to yourself, and thus example to the community, and example to the nation, and example to the world. There are ripple effects that spring off from you, whether you're in a church, whether you're in whatever you go to associate yourself with people. You have to be it. And it takes thinking different, working different, having a different mindset. And some of us have mindsets that are not right. So that's the purpose of the Engage platform. Starting with you, starting with your fears, starting with the fact that I've had a few false starts. There's some recordings that you'll never see because they were not perfect. And that's something I have to put aside, because that has been the reason why I haven't launched in certain areas, and I don't want to do that anymore. Being an example, I'll give you one more. My son had gotten his job, and he was spending so much time at work, and not work, but he was working hard. And I said, "Man, you working hard. Why are you doing that?" He said, "Dad, because you work hard." I said, "No, I don't. I don't work hard." He said, "Yes, you do." And he said, And he started giving me these things that he's observed over the years, things that I'd never even thought about. You do this, you do this, you this, and I had not even inventoried or taken account of all these things that he witnessed. And that said something to me. I was not perfect, but in the areas where I showed up for him, it was a good thing. He wanted to work hard so he can become self-sufficient, and ultimately, he's on his way to doing that, and maybe even retiring way before I am going to retire. So I'm very blessed to, even in my unperfect self body, that I've shown up enough for people in life to be able to be an example. And that's where I want you, and that's where I want to bring to the table, to this platform, real life situations that are going to help move you from here, A, to B. That's my contribution to the world now. And you can do it, but you have to start making subtle changes. And sometimes that means you have to let some people go. I was doing placement for students who were going to a private school, and I had to coach them through family. Sometimes it starts with family. You start going to school and start bettering yourself. And you know what? The first thing people are going to say when they get mad, you think you something because you're going to school or because you have another job. It has nothing to do with you. And sometimes that causes us to feel guilty. Guilty because of circumstance. Guilty because you did the work, and you feel somehow that, man, maybe she's right. Maybe he's right. But you can't succumb to that. And sometimes you've been that person. You have to counsel, you have to warn against, or at least be aware of the negativity that exists in you. I have to do it all the time. So that's what the Engage platform is about. That's what we're going to be talking about. So with that said, it's time to wrap this thing up. And we're going to engage even more. Come along with me for the journey. And we're going to get better together. We have a lot of work to do. And I'm so glad it starts right here, right now. Let's engage. Peace and love.